Hi Facebook fans, Pastor Sullivan here. Sorry for the long hiatus, but during Holy Week and during the Easter preparations, I kind of forgot we had a Facebook page. But we're back, and today's question is, Hello Pastor, who authored the book of James? Was it Matthew's brother James? Was it the half-brother of Jesus? Was it the son of Zebedee? Or none of the above? Well, it feels like I'm taking a multiple choice test here. I'm going to go with James the son of Alphaeus, otherwise known as James the Less in church history. He's not less because he's lesser of a man or lesser of a saint than James son of Zebedee, but because we just know less about him. It could not have been James the son of Zebedee, brother of John, really because he wouldn't have been alive around the time in which this letter was supposedly written. James the son of Zebedee died very early on in the spread of the gospel. In fact, his death is recorded in Acts 2, verses 1 and 2. Herod is the one that kills him. James the Less is also the one that becomes the bishop of Jerusalem, and the one of whom St. Paul says in Galatians 2:9 that he is a pillar of the church. So that's it as far as who I think wrote the book of James. Now, you didn't ask anything about content of the book of James, but while we're on the subject, that's always something worth talking about. First of all, we never take doctrine solely from the book of James, just as we don't from 2nd and 3rd John, 2nd Peter, Jude, or Revelation. The reason that we don't is because these books are antilegomena, which is a Greek word which means something along the lines of disputed or spoken against. In the early church, these books were all disputed as far as whether or not they should be in the canon because of questions like authorship and, in some circles, content and whatnot. So we never take doctrine solely from the antilegomena books. We take our doctrine, or rather Christ gives us his doctrine, in the Gospels and in Paul's epistles, and then we use the other books, the antilegomena books, to buttress and to support that doctrine up. The big problem that folks usually see when it comes to St. James and his content is chapter 2, because he seems to flatly contradict St. Paul. In James 2:24, James has been building this argument, addressing the idea of faith that doesn't have any good works attributed to it, and he finally says in verse 24, "You see then that a man is justified by works and not by faith only." Now, this seems to flatly contradict St. Paul in the entire book of Romans, chapter 3 and 4 especially, and the entire letter to the Galatians. Paul teaches that we are saved by faith alone. Faith apprehends Christ's righteousness, Christ's forgiveness, all of his gifts, and that is attributed to us as righteousness, that belief, that faith is imputed to us as righteousness, much as Abraham was declared righteous in this way in Genesis 15, verse 6. So Paul and James seem to be saying something different here. However, I don't think this is the case. I think this can easily be summed up if we look at our human nature. When the human flesh hears, you don't have to earn your salvation, and that you can't merit any worthiness or favor before God, but that it's all by faith, the human flesh looks at that and says, okay, I don't have to do any good works. I'm off the cuff. Therefore, I'm not going to do any good works for my neighbor. That's the attitude that St. James is teaching against. And so St. James teaches us that faith works, not to earn salvation, but that faith, if it is alive, faith, if it is trusting in Christ's merits, if it is trusting in Christ's atonement in my place, if it is trusting Christ's forgiveness and apprehending him, it will, by nature then, spontaneously bubble up and bubble out of us in the form of good works for our neighbor then. Good works don't belong in the area of dealing with God. Good works only come into play for our neighbor. God doesn't need your good works. Your neighbor does, though. This can really be summed up in two very brief ways. The first is a brief axiom in which we say, good works are not necessary for salvation, period. Good works are necessary. So good works don't enter into the realm of justification and salvation, but good works are necessary in this life, again, to benefit neighbor, not to merit anything before God, but simply because God wills that they be done. And so living lives of faith, we say we want to be in accord with God's will. Another way of remembering this is from a hymn verse, from a hymn written in 1523 by Paul Spiritus. It's called Salvation Unto Us Is Come. And it goes like this. Faith clings to Jesus' cross alone and rests in him unceasing, and by its fruits true faith is known, with love and hope increasing. Yet faith alone doth justify, works serve thy neighbor and supply the proof that faith is living. So there's the book of James, author and potential problems, all in just under a couple minutes. So that wraps up today's ATP. If you have a question, make sure and send me an email at atpholycross@gmail.com, and I will get to it when I have both enough time and enough coffee to answer it. As always, thank you for sending in your questions, and we'll see you next week. Until then.